What's up everyone, it's Jinxed here. So in every one of my guides, I usually include positioning tips for that specific build. But today I want to go Super Saiyan 3 and give you a positioning guide for every single champion. This will allow you to apply these tips to any build you play so you can reach that final Ultra Instinct form.
This is autonomous Ultra Instinct.
Now this will be especially useful to the newcomers of set 4, and for the veteran players, let me know if there's anything I missed in the comments below. I will take the best comment and pin it so we can help everyone. Let's get started. Up first is Janna. Nothing too special with this unit. Basically, because she's an assassin, she'll always jump to the back line. And in the early game where there's not that many units yet, you do want her to jump on their backline carry, which is usually in one of the corners. But instead of putting it all the way left and all the way right, if you guess wrong, what's going to end up happening is she's going to have to spend a lot of time walking over all the way to the other side of the board. So instead, put her in one of these tiles here. This way she's jumping, and if you guess the right side, she only needs to take about one step to get to her target. If not, then she's a little closer to the side when you guess wrong. Now for Elise, she's special. She's considered a frontline unit, but she's ranged. So there's a trick you can use with her when playing against units such as Garen, right? When Garen is on the enemy team, he gets more value out of spinning on multiple units. So let's say you have your own frontline unit. What you don't want to do is you don't want to put both Elise and Wukong right next to each other, right? Because Elise can definitely be frontlined. Instead, you want to space them out by one tile. This way, if there's an enemy Garen, what you want to do is put the Wukong across the Garen. This way Elise uses her range form to attack the Garen, and that way the Garen is only spinning on the Wukong. If the Garen is across Elise, then Wukong walks up and still gets value, so you have to do this swap right here. It's a little bit advanced, but that's something you can do with frontline ranged units. Now Fiora deals a lot of damage if left alive, so with that said, we don't want to put her in the front line. Instead, we'll have our tanks do the tanking, and we usually want to put her somewhere in the second row so she's not getting that initial aggro and staying alive as long as possible instead. Garen is pretty straightforward, usually in the front. What you want to try and do with Garen is look where they have their clumped units, right? So if they have their frontline units to the right side, then try to put your Garen in the middle between those three. If their units are left side across here, then put your Garen in the middle of those three as well, so he can get the most value out of his spin to win ultimate. For Lissandra, her attack range is pretty low, so instead of putting her in the back line, she's going to take a few seconds to have to walk up and start attacking her target. So instead, you just want to place her in the second row to the back or second row to the front. Maokai ults in a straight line. So in the early game, when most units are frontline units and they have stuff like this, 2 to 3 frontline units, what you want your Maokai to do is, instead of putting it in the middle where he'll hit maybe 1-2 units at a time, if you put him off to one of the sides, what he'll do is walk up and then ult sideways, potentially hitting 2 to 3 units. Nami, unfortunately, there's nothing special about this unit, just keep her in the back. Alright, Nidalee's spear deals more damage the further the distance it's traveled. So in the early game, you'll see most top level players position something like this, most of their units in the back line, or maybe you'll see something like this. But when you have Nidalee specifically, this is when you want to put your front line all the way up in the front, so that they prevent their units from walking up, so that Nidalee's spear can travel a further distance. Tahm Kench is a big boy, keep him in the front. For Twisted Fate, you want to keep him in one of the corners. You get the most out of his ultimate if he's ulting from an angle, giving him higher potential to hit multiple units going down the line. So the best tiles for Twisted Fate are this one, this one, this corner over here, And then this spot right here, this one is best used if you put 2 frontline tanks in front of him, keeping him nice and safe. Vayne is pretty straightforward. You want to keep her in the back, but a quick tip about Vayne is if you ever get the chance to play 2 at the same time, make sure you're putting them on the same side. You don't want to split them up because double Vaynes will proc each other's bolts, stacking them twice as fast. So when you're playing double Vayne, just keep them on the same side. Wukong has a point and click stun for his ultimate, so the best thing you can do with Wukong is try to find big threats from the enemy front line and look to delay their ultimates by positioning your Wukong across from them. Yasuo gets the Fiora treatment. You don't want to keep him in the front as he deals a lot of damage the longer he's left alive. So keep him in one of the second rows and just make sure there's no units surrounding him because of his exile. Annie is another one of the rare ranged frontline units, so when you have a melee frontline unit along with your Annie, again make sure you're splitting them up by 1 tile so that any enemies that benefit from units surrounding them, for example Hecarim, you don't want to have your units like this because then they both walk up to Hecarim. Instead, if your unit's like this, the Garen will go up and then the Annie will attack from range. So that's the idea behind keeping 1 tile space when you have a frontline ranged unit. Nothing special about Aphelios, keep him safe in the back. Hecarim is a melee frontline unit that gets value from hitting multiple enemy units. This way you want to scout and look for where are the majority of their units clumped up. If it's the right side, lean towards the right side, left side, or if they're middle. So just look for the clumped units and put Hecarim in the middle of them. Janna is pretty straightforward. You want to keep her in the back, but a trick you can do with Janna when you 2-star her early. So if you find her early and the lobby hasn't upgraded their assassins yet, what you actually want to do is put her in one of the corners where the assassins are jumping to and just leave her alone. So keep your other units, let's say over here or right side. If you have a ranged unit, go ahead and do something like this. And their assassins are jumping left side. Keep your Janna alone here because the 2-star Janna will not die to a 1-star assassin. And instead what the assassins are doing, they're just feeding her mana to keep giving shields to their other units. So this is just a special case when you upgrade your Janna early. Jarvan will ult the farthest enemy from him, so you want to keep him on one of the sides so that he has potential to hit maximum amount of units on his way there. Now if there's assassins, what can sometimes happen is he will ult backwards instead. So you have to be careful. If you want to avoid that, then place him in the back so when the assassins jump him, he actually has potential to just ult across the entire map as the assassins jump to him and the enemy ranged units are in one of the side corners there. Jax has 2 uses. The majority of the time you want him in the front line to take advantage of that AoE stun. Again, look for clumped up units and put him on the side that they're on. His secondary use though is against assassins. You can actually place him in the back where the assassins are jumping, and that way he can buy time by stunning them when they reach the Jax. Now we're going to do a few champions at a time. There's one thing that's in common between all of these champions I'm showing you here. They all have the exact same attack range. And for all of them, it's pretty standard. You just want to keep them safe in the back. But there's one tile that's very, very risky for these particular champions. And that's this tile right here. What you want to make sure when you're putting them on this tile is that you don't put another 2 ranged units in these 2 tiles, and it can be any ranged units, Ashe, Jhin, just it cannot be 2 ranged units, because what this does is it blocks this unit in here, and if there's no enemy minion directly in front of them in this tile right here, they cannot reach any of the other tiles, and therefore they're just sitting there AFK for the entire time. The worst mistake I've done with this is with Kalista. I've put Kalista in this corner, 2 ranged units over here, and she's literally AFK the entire fight if there's nothing right across from her. So that goes for all of these champions I am showing right here: Lulu, Teemo, Kalista, Yumi, Kindred, Veigar, Morgana, and Zillion. Nothing special about all of these units except for the one that I mentioned. And then the second tile is this one. Same thing, make sure you don't put them in the corner here, and then 3 ranged units. You want at least 1 melee unit here or here. So after that melee unit walks up, then this one can walk up to get an attack range of their frontline units if there's nothing directly across from them. So same thing here, at least 1 melee unit. So this can walk up, and then the Kindred can walk up as well. Now, the only 2 units that there's something further that you can do with them are the Yumi and the Kindred, so I'll touch on that really quick. All right, the Kindred, because of her short mana pool, especially if she gets a blue buff, will ult very fast into the fight. Right now, if you keep her in the back line, sometimes what will happen is on that very first ultimate, she'll ult forwards or to the side, right? And she can sometimes put herself in dangerous positioning because of that. So instead, what I prefer to do with the Kindred is putting her in the second to back row. What this will do is she will usually want to ult in a position that's safe, right, or away from the majority of the enemies. In this row, her very first ultimate will go backwards, putting her in a much safer spot than, you know, ulting forwards or maybe ulting to the side close to one of the assassins. So Kindred I like on the second to back row. Sometimes it's even fine to put her on the second to front row. Now with Yumi, the way Yumi works is she's going to be ulting to one of your allies, right? So you don't need to put her in the back because she's usually ulting to safety, right? But you don't want to put her in the front either, as sometimes stuff can go wrong. She can get one shot, she can get crowd controlled. So the best tile for Yumi is actually the second to front row, giving her potential to take some damage and allowing her to ult faster and then just go to one of your allies and stay safe there. Another really good use for Yumi is when you're blocking stuff in. So let's get some ranged units here. And then when you're blocking her in from assassins, let's say you have your melee unit here. Remember the trick we just talked about, you don't want to block your corner unit here. So if an assassin jumps to Yumi, then Yumi might jump to a front line and then back to your front line, confusing the assassins where they have to switch targets then. So it buys you a little bit of time. So that's another really good use for Yumi. Assassin bait or in the second to front row. For Pyke to get maximum value, you want him in one of 4 tiles. This one, this one, this one, or this one. And that is because in those tiles he's going to jump at the most corner sides of the map, and then allowing him to ult as many units as possible when he ults the farthest target away. Kind of similar idea to Jarvan. Sylas, you always want him in the front row, right? Sometimes your melee units you use to block against assassins in the back line, but a Sylas ideally wants to be in the front because the faster his ultimate goes off, the faster he's delaying the enemy from them getting their ultimates, which is insane value in teamfight tactics if you can delay that ultimate. And if you're the first one to get your ultimates off, that puts you at a much higher advantage of winning that fight. Thresh falls under the category of melee ranged units. So again, if you have another melee unit up in the front, make sure there's a 1 space between them. And then what I like to do with the Thresh is against units like Ahri, right, where they're going to be ulting big clumps. So this is enemy Ahri. What you want to do with the Thresh is put him in one of the second to the front rows and on the sides. That way he's not walking up, and if you have frontline over here, then what happens is he'll usually stay here, maybe walk up 1, but then you're trying to spread out the Ahri ult, right? So instead of having it like this or like this, Ahri can ult this entire bomb, this entire squad, then at least you're splitting up your damage so Ahri can either hit, you know, these units or this one here. That's how I usually use my Thresh in the late game. Nothing too special about Vi. Because she shreds armor, try to put her across vanguards. Zed is a shade, instantly teleporting him to the farthest tile across from him. So with Zed, the quick trick about this is if you have a frontline unit, right, and you keep it here, then their ranged units, if they're clumped up in a corner, as you see most people do in the late game, let's find some ranged units here, and they just clump up here. then the Zed will instantly teleport and just land on the Wukong, right? But to play around that, instead of having your frontline units here, if you bring your own frontline units backwards, then what the enemy frontline units will do usually is take one step. And this can give you, it won't always work, but this can give you a chance of Zed sneaking in there as they have to walk up to get to your backline. So quick tip with Shade in general is you can keep your units here or completely in the back. Akali gets the exact same treatment as Zed, but now I want to talk about a particular scenario, in which case you're using RFC on these units. When you have RFC on them, instead of getting them to jump on the same side of where their carries are, because they're going to be clumped up, they usually can't get a good angle, they can't get in there. So instead with RFC, put them in the opposite side. What this will do is, you'll notice when they're same side, maybe they jump in and they're blocked, right? They can't get in there. So I'm going to give you a perfect example of usually how my units die when I position them incorrectly. And I'm going to use Jhin for this example. Jhin, and then we can assume some heavy vanguards protecting it, right? So your Zed will jump and they'll get stuck here, right? And they're attacking the Garen, the Sejuani. And what Jhin will do is, because of his big attack range, he can still hit whatever front line you have here. So he's attacking the front line. Now, as soon as Jhin finishes this frontline unit, let's say they also have another frontline here. Let's use the Aatrox. Okay, so these are enemies. These are good guys. Jhin is attacking the enemy frontline. As soon as he kills it, their enemy frontline is still stuck on our front line, and then Jhin instantly switches his aggro to Zed or Akali, right? Closest target. And usually the Jhin can finish off this unit before the Akali and Zed can get through the Garen, meaning the Jhin will be attacking your carry faster and then killing them faster. So instead what you do is get your Sejuani and Zed to jump opposite side. This way the Jhin, after he kills the front line, he's going to switch to another frontline target, because that's usually going to be the closest target. So this is how you want to play with RFC on Akali and Zed. Get them to jump on opposite side of their carries. What happens is they'll kill the Sejuani and then just work their way inside to their Jhin. Now, Evelyn is a special case. You don't usually want to put her on one of the sides to go and hit their, their carries, because Evelyn can hit up to 3 units. So I like putting Evelyn in the middle, giving her increased odds of hitting multiple units, as usually that's where most of their enemy units are, right near the middle. So she jumps there, and then if she goes to frontline, she goes to backline. It just gives her increased odds of hitting the up to 3 enemy units. Aurelia will get the same treatment as Maokai, if you remember. She ults in the line forwards, right? So instead of keeping her in one of the middle tiles where she'll ult the front line and stuff that's behind her, which is usually nothing, right? There's usually a big gap between the front line and the back line. The Aurelia ult can't reach all the way in the back. So instead, what you want to do is put Aurelia in one of the corners here, the front corners. This way she's walking up to that front line and ulting sideways, hitting as many of their frontline units that they have together here. Now, all of these units have increased attack range than the ones I showed you earlier. So all of these units are completely fine to go in this corner, and you can put ranged units in front of them as well. It's not a big deal. They'll usually be able to hit something in the front line here. And there's nothing too special about most of them, except first let's touch on Lux. Okay, Lux's best tile by far is this corner tile right here in the bottom right, because there's the maximum amount of tiles, or the most amount of tiles going from this corner to the opposite corner, giving her maximum value out of her ultimate when she is ulting this way. Now, her second best tile would be this one here, and again, it's about distance from this tile to the opposite tile. Okay, and the next unit that we can talk about here is Ezreal. Ezreal, again, you just want him in one of the corners here, right or left is fine, as you want him ulting through your allies, right? So if you have any allies you have here, he's ulting your allies plus ulting the enemy team, getting maximum value out of his ult. Because Katarina has an AoE ultimate, it's best to keep her in one of these middle tiles here. Again, similar to Evelyn, where you want her to jump in the middle and just ult as many units around her as she can. Whereas if she's one of the corners, if you completely whiff, she might ult 1 or 2 units. Middle tiles are the best for Cat. Kennen is a little squishy and can die pretty fast without keeper buff or any items to support him. So when you don't have any items or a big keeper buff on him, then you want to keep him in the second row a little bit safer, and that's completely fine. He'll still get good value from his ultimate. You want to usually keep him towards the middle, the center of the board, so he's ulting as many units as possible, unless you can get a good scout and see that, you know, okay, I know I'll be facing this guy, majority, all of his units are clumped up to the right side, then go ahead and put him across from there. Now this changes when you can get keeper buff on him or guardian angel, then you can 100% put him in the front line and apply the same tips. Nunu is a unit that I learned you always want to have in the front line if you can. Reason being is if you have him in the back, he doesn't get his ultimate off as fast, right? And the reason you want his ultimate to go off as quickly as possible is because he has the chance to just delete a unit from the field, especially if they have some health items and a brawler synergy, right? The reason why he gets his ultimate off faster if he's in the front is because he's taking damage, right? Whereas if he's in the back and you have something else over here, the only way he's going to be gaining mana is walking up and then starting to auto. Each auto he gets mana, whereas like this he also gets mana from taking damage, right? So you want to manipulate that, and I've talked about this in set 3, but here's the best way you can manipulate that if you have multiple frontline units. All right, if you have your Nunu like this in the middle, the only sources of damage he's taking are from enemies that are in these tiles and directly across from it. Any units here to the left are attacking Garen, any units here to the right are attacking Silas. So we can increase the amount of damage Nunu takes by putting him in this tile or this tile, because this way he's taking damage from these units and to the right. If you want maximum amount of damage and you know he can live, then put him, you know, solo frontline where he's taking damage from all of these sources here. Nunu in the front, he can delete enemies. Xin Zhao gets the same treatment as Wukong. He taunts an enemy near him, so just put him across an enemy where you want to potentially delay their ultimates by Xin Zhao getting his ultimate off first. All right, we're getting to the good stuff. If you made it all the way to this point of the video, you a real one. All right, Aatrox. This one's a doozy. So he pulls 2 farthest enemies away from him, right? The way you want to think about Aatrox is pretend like there's blitzcranks, if you remember blitzcranks, in both corners, and they just pull the farthest enemy. Now, here's the trick with Aatrox, all right? Let's pull up Jhin and 2 ranged units. We'll use Jinx and a sharpshooter. Let's bring out the Vayne here. All right. Now, you want to be careful because if enemy Aatrox is on this tile, then the Jinx might have to walk up here. Will have to walk up here if he's this far, right? Now, what this does, the Jhin will not have to walk up because he'll still be in range. Same with the Vayne. So if you see what this does is now the farthest enemy is the Jhin and whatever other unit he wants to pull. So that's what you want to be careful. Instead, how you play around that is you always have to match your carry across the Aatrox. So if you put your units like this, now neither of them have to walk up and they can hit the Aatrox that's over here. The best way to think about it is you want 2 ranged carries on the side of him that won't move at the beginning of combat. So if the enemy Aatrox is here, then the same thing, you have to match, put your Jhin here, and this way they don't walk up when they have to hit the Aatrox. Ahri's ultimate is completely random targeting, so there's nothing special about her, but one quick tip is if you do have a Guardian Angel on Ahri, her ultimate continues while in the Guardian Angel formation. So this is why you'll see some guides or some top level players position her in the front, because what this will allow for is she will always get her ultimate off, and quickly, right? As we talked about, another way units can gain mana is by taking damage. So with a Guardian Angel, she's taking damage, making her ult very fast, and with a Guardian Angel, she will always get one ultimate off. Now, this can change if you put her in the back line and maybe you have a mana item on her as well as your, standard damage item. Now, in this case, you don't want to frontline her because the mana item will allow her to get 2, 3, multiple ultimates off, even if she has the Guardian Angel. So those are the decisions you have to make. All right, Cassiopeia is pretty simple. When she's 1-star, keep her in the second row to the front. When she's 2-starred, always frontline her. And again, look to get maximum value out of her by scouting to see where the majority of their units are. All right, Riven has a unique feature where she will always dash to the first enemy that she targets. Now, you can use this against enemies like Set, for example, right? So let's say they have a Set. What Set wants to do is grab your enemy and ult them into your team, right? But Riven completely counters him. If you put Riven across from a Set, Riven will ult behind him, like dash behind him, and then Set takes the Riven and ults behind, ulting completely nothing, right? So this is a really good counter tool against units like Set that want to ult forwards. All right, this is going to be a good one because I'm going to start talking about dealing with multiple threats at the same time. So first off, just Sejuani. When playing as Sejuani, you want to manipulate her ultimate by going off as fast as possible. So try to avoid having, especially when she's 2-starred, try avoid having units beside her, as you want to increase how much mana she's getting. So do that by keeping her kind of alone-ish, or even just solo frontline. You just want to get her ultimate off as fast as possible. Playing against Sejuani, what you want your ranged carries, where you want your ranged carries to be, let's just use Jhin, is 4 options: here, 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 or here. That's if the Sejuani is mid, because then her range will not be able to hit those 4 tiles right here. And then it's just simple. If their Sejuani is here, move your carry opposite corner. If it's here, move your carry opposite corner, right? But now, hold on. What if they have a Sejuani and an Aatrox, right? So here, you can't corner your Jhin, right? Because Aatrox will pull it. So instead, what you want to do, you can't keep it on this side. So this gives your Jhin only one good tile to put it on. And that's going to be this one with ranged carries on either side of him. Let's just use these 2 as an example. Okay, this way he's dodging the Sejuani ultimate and also the Aatrox pull as well. If their Sejuani and Aatrox are like this, then you just swap sides. Again, he's dodging the Sejuani ultimate and the Aatrox pull. Now, a really big problem comes once they have Aatrox, Sejuani, and an assassin. Let's find, we can use Katarina, but I'd rather use something like a Kali, maybe a bigger threat. Okay, now what you want to do against this, right? You can't put him in a corner, because the Aatrox will pull. If you put him in the middle, well, a Kali can jump on there. So in this case, you're going to need something to keep him from jumping in, like a melee unit you can use here. Okay, so there you go. You get the melee unit in here in one of these 2 tiles. If you can get 2, that's ideal, because now it completely blocks, okay, her from jumping in. The Kali will get stuck here. All right, so that's when dealing against Sejuani, Aatrox, and an assassin unit. And there's actually one more big tip I forgot to mention about playing against Sejuani. When you see enemies having Sejuani, do not put your units like this, okay? Your front line here and your back line like this. You have to have a unit in the front, because what will happen is Sejuani will walk up and just ult your entire team. So if enemies have Sejuani, you need to have minimum 1 unit in the front, so Sejuani gets stuck on it and ults over here keeping your backline safe. That's the only way you can keep your backline safe. Shen is pretty straightforward. Put him in the front. Try to get him to ult diagonally if you can, so he's ulting as many units as possible. Talon. The biggest tip I have about Talon is utilizing his ultimate correctly. So as an assassin, you actually don't want to put him across, you know, their threats, right? Let's say it's Jinx, because usually what they do, as I've talked about so much in this video, is they corner her, right? And then Talon gets stuck on the Wukong. Instead, I want to use the classic brawler Ashe example, okay? And I'm gonna pull up some brawlers here and I'll show you how they usually position. We're gonna get the Warwick in here too. Let's maybe get the Vi and maybe the Sylas as well here, okay? So usually they will surround the Ashe and they might have 1 or 2 units. I can grab the set here to make it super realistic. And they'll have 2 frontline units like this, right? Now your Talon will jump and get stuck on a brawler, can't really get to the Ashe. Instead, you want to focus one of the 2 units here, whichever one their weakest is, basically whichever one doesn't have items. It might be their Maokai, it might be the Vi. Sometimes these units will even be 1-starred, right? They haven't had a chance to upgrade them yet. So get your Talon to jump on one of these weak frontline units that they have protecting the Ashe, because what will happen is they reset on them and then Talon jumps to the highest dealing enemy target damage. I worded that horribly, but anyways, so after he kills the Vi, then he'll instantly jump to the Ashe because she will be doing the most damage after Talon gets that first kill. So we want to treat Warwick kind of like Fiora and Yasuo, where he gets added value after he ults. So you want to be careful about frontlining the Warwick, as if he dies too quick, then he doesn't really get value. You want to keep him a little bit safer on the second to front row or second to back row. So he's walking up, and then after he gets his ultimate off, he can start going to town. All right, Azir soldiers actually have quite a few uses to them. I'll just use these as Azir soldiers. The first way is against Aatrox. Put your Ezreal soldiers in the 2 corners here, and then Aatrox will pull them. Be careful, because I've seen this happen to me, is let's say they have an assassin, usually it's like a Kayn, and let's say you have your Jhin right over here, and I'm gonna put up the Aatrox so you can see that we're playing against the Aatrox here, okay? If their Kayn is on the sides, Kayn will jump, kill the Azir soldier, and then Aatrox will pull your Jhin. So you want to be careful about where their assassins are, because you need to keep your Jhin a little bit safer, or even the best thing to do is just put a frontline unit here so they kill the frontline unit, then the Azir soldier, and that way the Aatrox can't pull, you know, the Jhin right away. Another use of the Azir soldiers is trying to bait the set ultimate, or bait some of the ultimates like Sejuani to go in a certain direction. So let's say you have a frontline unit like Sejuani. We can pull her up here, and their set is in the front. Well, what you can do is clump up your units on the right side, and then keep the one Ezreal soldier to kind of bait the set ultimate left side instead. And the final use of the Ezreal ultimate that I know of is just using them for corner baits to block in the assassins, right? Just keep them safe so assassins can't jump in here. You have another range carry here. So use those as your soldiers against assassins. Kayn is your typical shade, but the special thing to know about him is that he resets his ultimate if he only hits 1 unit. So see if you can find a lonely enemy unit, even if it's a frontline target, right? Let's say they have like just a Hecarim or a brawler in the back. If you can get that Kayn to reset on them, it will just demolish them right away. Another good use is just throwing him in a clump, because his ultimate is an AoE, so he will deal a ton of damage. So 2 uses: try to find an isolated unit or just put him in a clump. All right, it's time for Lee Sin. I know some of you have been waiting for this. You want Lee Sin in the front to take care of their biggest threats as fast as possible. You know, those Rivens, Annies, the unkillable tanks. and especially if Lee Sin has defensive items. Heavily consider QSS, blue buff, those are some of his best items, and then something where he can survive a little bit. If he's 1-star and doesn't have the defensive items, then you do want to put him in that second row and rely on him to get his ultimate off just by him attacking. But if he's 2-star, has some items, front row, get him to just focus that target right away wherever they are, put it across from them so he can follow them, kick them off the map. There's one tile where his kick will instantly get rid of someone, and that is this tile right here. But this is a very special case if they happen to have a unit on this tile, right? If they have a unit on this tile, this will be mirrored, so that'll be this tile over here. And if your Lee Sin is here and focuses them, the very first kick will kick them off the map. Another really great use of this is when they have a frontline unit and it's off to one side. So let's use Riven. Let's say they have the Riven here and they have some backline units, okay? Maybe an Ahri, maybe a Jhin. Let's just use some backline units. What you can do in a case like this is if you put your Lee Sin all the way on this side, he will avoid the Riven and just walk straight into their backline, right? This is very special cases, but if this happens, same thing, his very first kick will just kick them off the map. Lilia has a very short attack range, and because of her mana pool, she can usually almost always get her first ultimate off. Therefore, you want to keep her in the second from the front row. The best tile I like for her is, this one here, but any of these can work. When you have a set, bring everything else back. It's as simple as that. No matter frontline, backline units, just bring them back, leave set, solo frontline. You just want him to ult as soon as possible and then go out of the fight, okay, so he can start doing his sit-ups. If you delay that, if you have units in front of him and he's not getting his ultimate off, he's slow, he's attacking, he's not getting mana as fast, then what happens is by the time that he goes to do his sit-ups, all of your other units will die. So that's why we manipulate that by having him go do his sit-ups first by being solo frontline. Yone is very similar to Yasuo, where you don't want to full frontline him even though he gets a shield, because this unit actually does quite a bit of damage when he stays alive, and therefore you want to keep him in one of the second to front rows. Make sure there's nothing surrounding him, and then also look at angles, right? If you play him across the majority of their units, his AoE stun is actually quite massive, so look to get him at angles so he can ult as many units as possible, nothing surrounding him. That is everything I know. If you found any of this useful, the best way you can help me is sharing the video and clicking the like button. If you want more content like this, consider subscribing to stay up to date with the TFT meta. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.